Hello there, and welcome to another instalment of Wrongway's Colombia Cast with me, Brendan Wrongway Corrigan. Now, since March of this year, Colombia has officially been in a state of emergency in a bid to combat, in vain some argue, the spread of coronavirus. During this time, it's pretty much been work to rule for many government bodies, including those involved in the issuing of visas. Thankfully, for holders of visas that have expired, as well as tourists stranded here whose 90-day permit has long since passed, this emergency period doesn't count as time spent in the country. That aside, there are still a number of grey areas for non-residents both here in Colombia and those who left this year but wish to come back, together with people looking for their first visa. Joining us to shed a bit of light, well, we hope anyway, on all of this is Camilo Trujillo, a consultant on visa-related issues in Colombia. Camilo, to start off with, and just to clarify, those still in Colombia whose visas have expired during this coronavirus emergency period, they basically just have to sit tight and wait until migration services return to something resembling full service. Is that right?
Well, that really depends on the kind of visa and the kind of activity that they're going to carry out, let's say that after their visa expires. But I would actually like to talk about those who actually consider having a tourist visa, which is a normal misconception between what we call non-regulated nationalities. Those who have non-regulated nationalities are those that don't need a visa to enter the country, such as, for example, people from the United States, French, for example, most Europeans. And in this case, they don't have a tourist visa. It's what we call a tourist permit, and that's a 90-day permit. Mm-hmm. So during this time, of course, they have to sit tight, wait for migration to open up, and then see what the situation is going to be once migration takes their regular daily activities. Now, those whose visa expired and are looking to continue in Colombia performing the same activity, and by this I mean, for example, work visas. And I'll give you a simple example. English teachers, for example, who are still working with the same English company or the same school, they do have to renew their visas during this time. In this case, Cancillería, the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, has not closed down. They've closed down their physical services. However, their online application services are still working. So those who are still in Colombia, they have a visa and they will continue to perform the activity from which that visa was granted to them, then those people have to renew their visas. And they have to do it before it expires. Now, if your visa expired and you didn't do it beforehand, then in that case, they do have to hang tight, wait for Migración Colombia to open up, and then request in Migración Colombia what they call an administrative process, and through that they will be given what is commonly given as a waiver, un salvoconducto. Then in that case, you have to hang tight. But the obligation is to renew your visa before it expires.
Now, I'm going to give a guesstimate here that I would say perhaps maybe 80% of visa holders are those who have their visa sponsored by a company. So in the case you mentioned teachers, that would be through a school, that they probably do all the donkey work, so to put it, to get the visa renewed or give all the documents at least, and the person just has to go and upload them online. So I'm guessing for those working for companies, be it in a school or another company that has, and they're in the country because of their work, I'm guessing their companies should be doing all of that and know all of this, you would imagine.
I mean, here's a common misconception in this end, because unfortunately, I would say immigration law is not taken too seriously by companies. Most of the clients that we consult with are companies that employ expats, and what the common denominator here is that they don't really understand much of immigration law, as it's changed so much, and before maybe it wasn't so enforced. So many of these companies, and we're talking, language institutes, schools, universities, as we could also be talking, for example, with about other companies that maybe work, trade in some other kind of money.
Higher, yeah. Mm-hmm.
They sometimes don't know of these obligations, and then they jump through these obligations, and then they jeopardize the expat, their expat employee. So the one that would end up having to pay penalization, the one that would actually have to go through an administrative process, and the one whose continuity is interrupted, and we'll get into that a little bit later, is the expat employee, unfortunately. So what I would do is, try to talk to somebody to assess the situation, try to talk to the company, see if they're aware that their obligation is to renew this visa before it expires, and then take action. But at this moment, There are many companies who employ expats that don't know that they have to renew their visas before they expire.
Okay, well, I guess the main point to take from this, because maybe some people erroneously thought that they didn't have to renew their visa during this period of state of emergency, but the main point is you do have to renew your visa, whether it's through a company or an independent visa.
Exactly. I mean, in this case, if your activity is going to continue to be the same after your visa expires, then you have to renew it. And then doing it before it expires, obviously, will save you time, money, and headaches. As we know, Colombia is highly bureaucratic and sometimes senselessly bureaucratic. So it's rather easier to just try to talk to one of the authorities. You can consult this directly, for example, at the Ministry of Foreign Affairs page. They also launched a resolution for the state of emergency, which is Resolution 1260. And in this resolution, of course, they also explain the fact that if you are to continue to perform the same activity, you have to renew your visa before it expires.
Okay. Now, another thing is, and I'm going to throw the spanner into the works here, although, first of all, I want to mention, you said about Colombia being heavily bureaucratic. In some ways, I have to say the visa process, and I know a lot about this the last few years. I've been here 8 years and I'm still going for visas. No residency, but that's another story. But it's certainly improved by no end in the last few years. You can do everything online. Now, sometimes that can be an issue because you do just want to talk to somebody face to face. But you have to do everything online, first of all, nowadays anyway, regardless of coronavirus. But it's pretty efficient, I have to say. Would you agree?
I do agree. I believe that, well, there are two entities mainly involved in a visa application process. The first one would be the Ministry of Foreign Affairs. The second one would be Migración Colombia. And I believe they're both going in the right direction. As of, I would dare say, more or less 2013, they started this whole idea of digitalizing everything. And recently, I believe this was when we elected the new president and the new government. Basically, most of the process is done online, so that really helps out. I would dare say that we are pioneers in matters of consulate services, because this doesn't only happen for the visa. This also happened for apostilles and legalizations. So I do believe that we're definitely going in the right direction. We just have to, I would dare say, we have to write the best path to get there. So the rules sometimes are not clear. Sometimes it isn't clear. The information for the visa applications isn't clear. And how the process really works sometimes isn't clear. So that's where I guess we should stress more on, because in matters of technology, it's doing extremely well.
Yeah, well, and like another thing, and I know this is trial and error. It's a bit like when Windows brings out a new version and they send it out kind of first of all, and then discover all the faults and the bugs in it. One thing that used to annoy me at the start of this was when you're uploading all your documents and you can only upload X amount of megabytes or whatever it is. I'm not a big tech wizard, but then I discovered like you have to go through all these sites to reduce the sizes of them and all this kind of stuff. So there are little things that if you know them beforehand, of course they're great because it means you can save a bit of time. But if you're going in online and doing it the first time and you don't know, you could spend hours trying to reduce all these documents and stuff. So there's little things like that people have to be aware of.
Exactly. I mean, that has been a challenge ever since we decided to go the digital way. I'll give you an example. As of right now, for example, there are extra requirements for the visa applications. They're now requiring insurance certificates, or they're requiring that you upload your prestaciones, which are paying for the private insurance in Colombia, and EPS and the professional insurance as well. So sometimes you run out of pages because they only accept up to 35 pages, or sometimes the files that you're uploading are extremely heavy. This happens normally with scanned paperwork. So, for example, if they request Cámara de Comercio, which would be the certificate of good standing coming from the Chamber of Commerce of Bogota, it is better if you actually acquire all those documents digitally, so directly from the website, instead of printing them and then scanning them, because, of course, that's going to take up more space.
Yeah, so there are little things like that, and of course it all just helps. By the way, if people can hear things in the background, I think my housemate has decided to start making, I don't know, a lot of noise. Anyway, that's podcasting during times of quarantine in a house. Anyway, Camilo, we'll get back on track here. I was going to ask you though, because this is if one person, i.e., somebody very close to me, had a visa sponsored by a company and then they left that company, but the time between they left and the start of this emergency, the company was obviously obliged to inform the Cancilleria, the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, that this person no longer works at the company. But it seems that hasn't gone through to the Cancilleria or anything. So that person's visa was meant to expire in December 2021. And at the moment, they kind of feel in limbo land, but they've heard absolutely nothing, but they no longer work for the company. What would be the advice for that particular person?
Well, this is one of those gray areas that we were probably talking about earlier, where the rules aren't really there for you to actually follow. And this is something that happens because the company, of course, and we also talked about this earlier, is completely ignorant of the immigration rules and the immigration laws. So they just basically believe that whenever this person quit or basically disengaged from the company, they don't know whether they have to report it or not. So this report doesn't really go before Cancilleria, the Ministry of Foreign Affairs. It goes before Migración Colombia, which is, I call it our Colombian ICE. So Migración Colombia is basically the one that is in charge of receiving all of the updates of what's going on with the expat while in Colombia, and also the one in charge of giving you the IDs, the cédulas de extranjería. So for this, Migración Colombia actually set up a platform that is called the CIDE, and then through this platform, the company is supposed to report that this person no longer works at the company. This person is supposed to actually carry that they're supposed to give it to the expat, and then that expat is supposed to carry that with them for the next time they actually enter Colombia. They show it, and then the Migración Colombia officer will stamp a 90-day permit in their passport.
Okay, so basically, if this person hasn't heard anything from Migración Colombia, and the company, I assume, knew what to do, because I believe they did, but it just seemed to get caught up in that time around coronavirus and the panic that was kicking in. So it just would be, because this is maybe a quite particular case, it's just in limbo now at the moment.
Well, it isn't really in limbo because this is a fully digital process. This is something that you don't really need to go to Migración Colombia and perform yourself. This is something that you do through your computer. And you'd be surprised how many companies are actually ignorant of, having to take care of these steps. So
yeah, but that's the company doing it, Camilo. But I'm saying, so the person who has the visa, they don't have to do anything, though. Yeah.
The person that has the visa, the company is supposed to actually perform what they call la notificación de desvinculación, so the disengagement notification to Migración Colombia. And then that, when they do that, they get a receipt, they get a certificate per se. That certificate they're supposed to give to your friend, and then your friend is supposed to show it whenever she comes into Colombia once again, so that they know that their visa is no longer valid.
Okay.
Migración Colombia will take the steps, and this is very unfortunate because, once again, gray areas. Migración Colombia, even if they have the record, because of course they have all that information within their software, it seems like their officers at the airport cannot really enter or verify that information, or they just simply won't. So it's better if she has the paperwork herself, and then whenever she comes back into the country, shows it so that they stop actually stamping her visa.
Okay, but what about the other scenario, that nobody says anything and nobody knows and the visa continues until it's meant to expire? Well, it's a bit disingenuous, I know, but that could be a scenario, could it?
This is very convenient for a few people, and of course it happens. I mean, and many people actually take advantage of this because it's a gray area that you could either take advantage of or it could actually deeply affect you. So it is convenient for a few people whenever they want to come into Colombia and have, and enter, no questions asked. But then whenever that person, for example, obtains another job, let's say that, you've been using your visa for a certain time illegally, and of course you can do it because the system is not very strict on it. But then you get a new job. So then whenever you apply for your new visa, they're gonna ask you for all that paperwork, including the disengagement notification. And when the visa officer actually analyzes the documentation, because the Ministry of Foreign Affairs is really good at analyzing documentation, though, they will find out that you were disengaged a long time before you were actually restamped with your visa into Colombia. So then at this point, you're going to have to change your status, backtrack it, and then backtracking your status is just going to, it's a headache. You're going to have to go to Migración Colombia. For example, at this point, or even today, we don't know when Migración Colombia is going to completely open. So at this point, for example, they have to hang tight. But let's say under a normal scenario, you're going to have to go to Migración Colombia. Your visa is going to have to get canceled. Your entry stamp is going to have to be placed again. You may actually undergo an administrative process and have to pay a penalization because you've been using your visa illegally. So it is better that everything goes step by step as it should. And if it doesn't, then, try to fix what's already been broken. It's very difficult.
But you're talking about getting the visa stamped. That's one thing I don't understand. But I'm saying if the person stays in the country, they haven't left Colombia, so they're still in the country, so that there's no entry or exit on that visa. They're just in the country.
They should then at that point, for example, as of today, start asking that company to give them the notification of disengagement. And then basically carry that around for every immigration process, for anything that they do. Or even, I would dare say, take it to Migración Colombia, tell them that you no longer work there, show them that they obviously notified them, and then they will most likely cancel her visa and place a 90-day period stamp on her visa. Now, as of today, that cannot be done, so basically just hang tight until Migración opens up.
Okay, yeah, interesting. It's a specific case, I guess, in many ways. I just want to come back to independent visas, because I've had plenty of those in my time, and they were relatively easy to get back in the day. I used to get a periodista independiente, an independent journalist visa. That got much more difficult in 2018. But for those type of visas, are there new requirements now for those who might want to get it? You mentioned the health insurance. That's a new one as far as I'm concerned.
Well, the health insurance is definitely not in the resolution. Let's say that if you go to the website and you request the information to apply for independent visa or any other kind of visa, they are not going to name the fact that you need the health insurance. This is something that they're requesting as of now because of the pandemic.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Mm-hmm.
But let's say that those requirements have actually become a lot more difficult, and then of course you are going to have to basically provide them, or they will not approve the visa. There are no extra requirements as of right now. They're requesting the Ministry of Foreign Affairs has complete discretion to request any documentation, and then this is something that has commonly been happening also for independent visas, and it's that they are requiring bachelor's diploma, fully stamped with apostilles and legalization, and then official translation. That is something that they're not only requesting for independent visas, they're also requesting for work visas in some cases. And in this case, they're also requesting experience letters to be written by previous employers or clients also.
Yeah, because certainly that about the degrees, having those getting those validated and translated, that was the thing that threw me in 2018, because I'd received, 4 previous visas, just going all the time with the same documents every year, and then in 2018 it was, we need this, so that changed, and they seem now like that's a basic requirement.
Yes, that's a basic requirement as of now. I mean, as of 2015, they changed the requirements a little bit with Resolution 6045. And ever since, they've been actually making changes. Rumors have actually been spread that we're probably going to be receiving another resolution and changes from the requirements and also some of the conditions. But we don't know yet for sure. I mean, there's been lots of discussion as let's say that whenever we change a minister, we're probably going to have little tweaks on the requirements.
Just on the health insurance thing, going back to that, does it have to be Colombian health insurance, or can you come in on international health insurance if they ask for that?
It can be international.
It just has to be any health insurance.
But what the requesting as of now is that health insurance can cover you up to $60,000.
Right. Okay. Right. So it's pretty substantial, I'm guessing. It's not. It's an area I know nothing about, so I don't even know. But it seems pretty substantial.
Substantial. They want to make sure that you're covered in case that you get sick here.
And if you have to use the APSs, the EPS as they call them here, you might be better off trying to have your own private health insurance.
Exactly. I mean, if you're paying EPS, or if, for example, in the case of work visas and those people who those expat employees that do get that provided for because of their jobs, then of course they request that EPS, the stubs for those EPS payments.
A question in terms of, I see this a lot on a lot of the social media and the various Facebook groups and things like that. The easiest visa to get, if that even exists, do you have any knowledge of that? Are there kind of visas that are kind of you're guaranteed simple to get? I guess if you're coming here with lots of money and want to invest in property or set up a company, they'll probably bend over backwards for you. Would that be true?
Well, that really depends on the investment. There are 2 types of visas for investment. There are 3 types of visas for Colombia. No more than that.
Yeah.
Those 3 types of visas are visitors, migrants, and residents. And then under a certain amount of factors, you can actually, let's say, apply for sub-visas under those names. So in this case, if you are an investor, it really depends on the investment that you're going to carry out. If you are to invest in Colombia, you could apply for a migrant or a resident visa. Now, migrant visas can last up to 3 years, and then they expire, and then you have to renew them.
Mm-hmm.
Or resident visas that it's within those gray areas, because according to the resolution of the immigration resolution in Colombia, you don't have to renew it. However, the visa does expire every 5 years, and Migración Colombia will request you to renew it every 5 years to be able to give you a new cédula. So it really depends on the amount that you are actually going to invest in Colombia. If you are going to invest what we call here, because they actually measure everything by minimum wages, if you're going to invest about 100 minimum wages, then you can apply for a migrant visa. if you are to invest for over 650 minimum wages, which we would be talking in this case about, I would say about 500 million pesos, then you can apply for a resident visa. Now, those are
500 million pesos in dollars. What is that about?
We would be talking about 100,000, more or less.
Okay.
Now, this is interesting in that end. However, there is there is many other ways that you could actually apply for visas, and there are way easier visas that you can apply for other than the investor visas. It is, of course, if you're going to invest, let's say that they bend over backwards and they try to help out of the fact and they actually will approve your visa. However, there is a certain number of documents that take time to get. The money needs to be, of course, legally entered into the country. It needs to go through the central bank, Banco de la República. And then we actually have to get all the paperwork showing the tracing of the money. However, there are also bilateral and reciprocal visas that we issue for many South Americans, for example, in this case. And we would be talking about the cases of Ecuador, Brazil, Peru, Paraguay, Bolivia, Argentina, Uruguay as well, which is the Mercosur visa. It's a migrant visa that lasts up to 2 years, and then after those 2 years, you are given a resident visa, where it's actually extremely easy for you to get, and all you need is your records from the last country you lived in for the past 3 years.
But that's just for Mercosur countries. There's no other country that has an arrangement outside of Latin America like that. No?
Mexico, Alianza del Pacífico visa. But that's only meant for people who are coming to work part-time, mainly travel through Colombia, and they have to be under 30 years old. But other than that, the regular, let's say the regular laws apply.
You had mentioned that outside of like an investment visa, that there are other easier visas. So what would you class as, in inverted commas, easier visas to go for?
That really depends on the activity that you're going to perform. I mean, the first thing that you should do before even applying for a visa is to plan ahead of what that activity is going to be. Of course, the independent visa is not easy to get. I mean, they've become quite strict on it.
Uh-huh.
So it really depends on what you're going to do in the country. We have, for example, the visitor transfer visa, which is meant for people who come, transferred to Colombia, and the company that they work for doesn't really exist in the country, or they're not going to have a local contract, for example. That one is another easier visa to get. It really, really depends on the activity that you're going to carry out. And
that visitor visa, sorry, Camilo, but that's separate to the 90-day permit that most people get from Europe, anywhere in the United States. That's something completely different.
Yes, as mentioned earlier, there are three types of visas. So the visitor visa, let's say that is the visa that enables people to stay in the country for the least amount of time before having to renew the visa. For example,
but I just thought that was for people who didn't have the arrangement of a 90-day, like there were countries that you had to apply in advance to just visit the country, but it's actually something different.
Yeah, it applies to a different to a different range of activities. So of course it applies to those who actually need a tourist visa to enter the country. And I'll give you an example. We have India is a restricted nationality. And under certain exceptions, because there are exceptions to which Indian citizens won't have to apply for a visa, and they will still be able to enter Colombia. And if you want to, we'll get into that a little bit later. But most Indian citizens have to apply for a tourist visa, even if they're just coming on tourism. So the visitor visa has a wide range of reasons why you should apply for it. In the case of what we call restricted nationalities, also, for example, Cubans, you have to apply for a visitor tourist visa. But if you are transferred by your company to Colombia, and then that company is not yours, the local company, the Colombian company is not your sponsor in Colombia, then you also have to apply for a visitor visa, which is what we call the visitor transfer visa.
Okay. And the maximum length of time on a visitor visa is how long?
Maximum is 2 years, and then you have to renew it again.
Oh, okay.
It also applies to
Okay.
volunteers, for example.
But longer than I thought. One visa, and we won't go on. I mean, if people have questions, we can send in, and we could get you back on for another episode. But I'm just kind of conscious of the time as well. But the one we didn't mention, and maybe the most popular one for some people, is entering into a civil union with a Colombiana or a Colombiano. That's another popular option, isn't it?
It is a very popular option, of course. I mean, if you manage to get into a steady relationship with your girlfriend or boyfriend, then of course, I mean, it's an option that happens a lot. However, they've started actually at this moment being a little bit more strict on it. Of course, the legal unions, for the most part, and commonly they happen here in Colombia. So what we call una unión marital de hecho. However,
Okay.
sometimes those visas you're able to apply for while you're married outside of Colombia. So let's say that, I don't know, you married somebody in your country and then you bring in the marriage certificate, completely, conditioned for the application. That means the app legalized and apostilled, and you have the translation and basically everything's okay. As of now, they're actually being a little bit more strict on it. They want you to actually do that legal union here, which is.
But we're talking about but marriage versus the union libre is what I used to know it was called anyway here, because I know of a couple of people, and you might know one or two of them as well, that had multiple union libres, as I said. That's what I used to call it anyway, or I thought it was called. That visa is still on the go as well, though, yeah?
Yeah, that visa is on the go. Unión Libre basically certifies the state. It's so basically you're in the middle of what they call this is called a legal marriage. I think it's called something like that. Legal union. Sorry. So
legal union,
it's considered a legal union once you've lived with somebody for over 2 years. But you actually have to go to a notaría and get what they call unión marital de hecho. Yeah, and then that's basically the concept that we have under the Unión Libre in Colombia. But yes, of course, I mean, there's many people that actually go for that.
Yeah.
And of course it's a way. It's a very interesting way because it actually, there's something that I call the road to residence. So it's the thing is, depending on the conditions that you renew your visa, at some point you're eligible for residency.
Yeah.
The last.
Isn't it 5 years if you have 5 consecutive visas?
Yes, yeah. but not if they're visitor visas. They have to be migrant visas.
Okay.
So there's a way to get to residency faster than those 5 years, and that really depends on your condition in the country. If during those 5 years you have a migrant work visa per se, then of course you have to wait the 5 years and then apply for the residence. But if you do it through a marriage visa, for example, in this case, Unión Libre that we're talking about, it's going to be 3 years instead of 5. If you do it through the Mercosur visa, it's going to be 2 years instead of 5. So it really depends on your condition in the country.
Okay, interesting. Just one final question on the marriage, Unión Libre, civil unions. Are officials a little stricter as well in terms of, because some people find a partner and they're not exactly going out or anything, but they come up to agree to a little arrangement to get married so the person can stay in the country or enter this civil union. Do the officials at migration or La Cancillería actually start asking questions? Or does it depend on the case?
For the most part, they request an interview. But, I mean, as of right now, most of the physical services are actually, and by physical services, I mean person-to-person services in Cancillería are closed. So, as of now, if you apply for it, you just have to abide by whatever the officer requests from you over the computer. They're not going to do a Skype interview or anything like that. Now, there's something that...
do a Skype and show your partner in the background walking around. Yeah.
That's not going to happen. Yeah. There's also something that is interesting, though, and for example, is one of the cases that we've seen few throughout this time. And for example, these partners or actually legally married couples whose partner was outside of the country when we entered the sanitary emergency. For example, the ones I've heard from the most is legally married couples whose husband or wife or partner never requested a visa, and now they're stuck somewhere outside of Colombia and cannot come in because, you could only enter Colombia if you're a resident, and by resident I mean somebody that lives in Colombia through a visa, not a resident visa, but a visa, and then the consulate's closed down. So there's some good news in that end, because if you are outside of the country, you have to apply for that visa at the nearest consulate outside of Colombia. And if that consulate is closed, there's really nothing that you can do. There is good news. There's a resolution, which is Resolution 1585, that actually enables consulates to open up the visa services all over again, and where the Ministry of Foreign Affairs enables outside of Colombia applications all over again. Now, that only applies to certain consulates in certain states within some countries. So you basically have to find out a little bit further in the Ministry of Affairs website, but some of the consulates are starting to open up all over again.
Interesting you should mention that, because I was just listening on the BBC World Service today. They talked about trying to change this rule where people can't enter countries, and this is in other countries, that Denmark apparently has an arrangement where if you can prove that you're a couple together or whatever, that you can be reunited. And there's a campaign taking place, I think, in the States right now, getting underway to get that open in the United States as well. Because, it's another factor in this whole pandemic that people have probably forgotten about, that you have couples who maybe aren't legally married or whatever, or don't have the necessary paperwork, and they're stranded in different parts of the world, which is unfortunate for them, obviously. I heard of one case, an Irish guy who was going out with somebody in Texas, and his partner had a baby, and of course he couldn't travel there to be with the baby. So I'm sure we've similar cases here, as you mentioned.
Yes, I mean, of course there are ways that unfortunately, though, I mean, that doesn't really exist here. I mean, if the nearest consulate to you is closed, it's closed. There's really nothing that you can do. And for example, in this case, where we're talking a baby being born away, but let's say that, for example, a foreigner has a Colombian baby with his partner, then in that case, of course, they can apply for a residence, but they still have to wait for the consulates to open.
God knows when that will be. At the end of the year.
In certain places, it's already happening. Actually, before this interview, I actually talked to a friend of mine who is a consul person outside of Colombia.
Okay.
And I basically wanted to get the list of those consulates that were opening across the world, Colombian consulates across the world. It's not that easy for them to know. All he was able to tell me was that certain consulates are opening up. It really depends on the state or the department and the country where they're at. But my guess is that since the U.S. has actually adopted this, let's say, market over coronavirus position, my guess is that some consulates in the United States, for example, will be opening up pretty soon.
Yeah, okay. And I'm not sure what the situation is in my own country with the Colombian embassy there, but Ireland has kind of slightly reopened a little bit anyway, so maybe things are open there. Not 100% sure. Just to wrap this up, though, Camilo, your day job, so to put it as well, and I know this all ties in with your day job, but you're with an international transport and moving company, Pack and Go, if I'm correct. Yes. I'm guessing in that area there's been a lack of activity, or have you been kept pretty busy? What's the story?
Well, Pack and Go is a company where we try to be a one-stop shop for foreigners moving to Colombia, and also moving merchandising and products into and outside of Colombia. Legally, of course. I mean, I don't have to clear that up, do I?
Yeah, that's very clear. Okay.
But either way, what I mean by that is we're a one-stop shop. So, of course, let's say that the immigration department is actually suffering right now, at the point where we haven't had many cases, and we've actually tried to stay up top in trying to answer questions and keep ourselves within the loop of people, trying to provide information, because we know that this is very confusing. But we also do international moves for let's say that executives and and also many of these investors that we talked about earlier, and also diplomats. So that has actually moved around quite a bit. International moves, container services, imports and exports has actually moved around a lot. And of course, and surprisingly, pet transportation is also happening. It's also moving quite a lot. So we felt the COVID, we felt the coronavirus syndrome, but it hasn't really hit us that hard.
How are people moving pets? People can barely move. I don't understand that.
Well, most of the people that live in humanitarian flights, for example, many of them are diplomats, or they're here with some kind of embassy or something like that. So, I mean, if you're leaving and your pet is actually under the conditions to be able to leave the country and not be quarantined elsewhere, then you can move it, as long as we have the certification from.
But you mentioned, so this is all with the humanitarian flights, of course, but I mean, in terms of normal commercial stuff like that's obviously been badly hit.
Well, cargo flights are coming and leaving all the time.
Okay.
We have all kinds of cargo flights actually coming into Colombia, so you could actually ship your pet abroad.
If you wanted to break from your pet for a while, yeah, I guess. Some people might want to do that with their partner after being locked up in the longest lockdown in the world here in Colombia. Can I pack my partner away?
I mean, personally, I was looking into living and living sometime in Australia. The whole reason why I didn't do it was because of my pet. So people are really attached to them.
No, of course, for sure, Camilo, indeed. Look, I'm going to leave it there because I'm just kind of conscious we've been going on for 3/4 of an hour here, but I'm sure we might get a lot of questions, and people listening will have questions, but they can contact you via the company or directly, or how can they do that? They
can contact me via email. My email is ctrujillo, so C as in Camilo, ctrujillo. My last name is T as in Tom, R as in reflex, U as in union, J as in.
Okay. I can include that in the text anyway. Yeah. So
perfect.
I can include the email.
So
yeah.
ctrujillo at pygbox.com, and then they can contact me. We'll be more than glad to help them out.
Yeah, and if we've a load of questions, we can get you back on as well to clear up any confusion, Camilo. Look, that's been an absolute pleasure. Apologies for the little interruption we had there when my housemate decided to start making a racket in the kitchen. But these are lockdown podcasts. You never know what could happen. Thankfully, I have no pet though running around here. I'll let you get back to your newborn as well. I know your life has changed in the last 3 months. So thanks a million, Camilo, for joining us here on Wrong Ways Colombia Cast. If you do want to get in touch with me, remember my Twitter handle is @WayCorrigan. You can find me via my Facebook page. That's at Wrong Way Corrigan blog on Facebook. But until the next time, ciao, ciao.